So
Yeah.
you're on a film set at the moment, is that right?
So again?
Are you on a film set at the moment?
No, I'm in my house.
Okay. I thought you said in one of our early emails, I'm going to be on set or something. I must have got that wrong.
Oh God! If I did, then I don't know what I was talking about. But no, I mean,
And I've been listening to Intruder because I'm not only a fan of yours, but I'm a fan of Paul Mullen from Your Codename Is Milo, who I know you work with on it.
yeah, I know Paul. Well, more in the video actually. Paul was, in fact, again last week I worked with Paul. Yeah, I like Paul. Paul's a very good man, actually, and very, very clever. He did a song when I was working on the last album. I was struggling a little bit to find sort of the right direction for it, and I'd done a few things, and then I heard a Losers song. Can't remember the name now, unfortunately, but it was so brilliant. I stopped everything. I wrote to A. Fenton, who produces my stuff, and said everything we've done so far is not good enough. So we need to go back and just start again. Because I said, listen to this, and it was one of Paul's songs, and it was it was a good thing actually, because it made us rethink the album. We made a much better album because of it.
Well, in the Northeast, his band Your Codename Is Milo were really huge and had like a cult following, and they've been trying to get back together, do a reunion gig for a while. And I've got my
really?
ticket, and it keeps getting pushed back. So then when I heard he collaborated with you, I was like, well, that's something. That's cool. That's going on.
He's over here now, isn't he? I mean, he's out in the desert. I was with him. What's the date now? Last week or week before? I can't remember, because we were shooting a new video for the next single.
Really?
And he's part of the team putting that together. So at one point we were trying to dig out a Jeep that got stuck in the sand, and then we got a storm hit, and we got stung. We was walking, trying to find our way back to our camp, where our safety was, because everything was flooding. It was the weirdest thing. Didn't expect. We were driving there. Funny enough, we were driving along into this vast expanse of desert with mountains in the distance, and coming down this hill into this flatland, and there was a sign on the side of the road saying "Danger, flooding," and I thought, "Fuck off!" Yeah, it's not flooded here in 1,000 years, by the looks of it. And within 2 hours, it was flooding. It was amazing. This big storm came in. The water came down in absolute torrents, and it just didn't go in. It just stayed on the surface. And most amazing things, I had to eat my own sarcasm at that point.
It's an interesting thing you say that, because I recently read, Revolution, and the number of adverse events that you overcome, particularly with your flying, you seem to be kind of constantly averting disaster, Gary, all the time. It's like, it's quite impressive, the episodes that you sort of go through.
Oh, I do like a challenge. Yeah, I do actually.
Yeah.
Makes those things, when those things come along, I think it makes life interesting, doesn't it? And it is challenging. And I spent the first darkness fell after the flooding, and I spent the first sort of 30 minutes walking around this sort of flooded desert landscape in the pitch black with my torch, trying to find a way through the rocks to get us all out. Wow. And did it though. We all got out eventually, but there was this tortuous path because the road coming in was completely flooded. That was impassable. So to try to find a way across the rocks back to the Route 66, actually, the main road that was nearest to our camp was a fairly dilapidated stretch of Route 66. It just felt quite cool actually, but it was good. I love all that though. I mean, I love it. All the flying stuff and the flying around the world and all the different things that have happened. It just makes life interesting. I've only got one, as far as I'm concerned. So you want to live it, don't you? Get as much out of it as possible.
What I find really interesting is the thought of when you have these experiences, and even if they are testing or even traumatic, how as an artist it kind of makes an impression on your consciousness. And I find it interesting how it might turn up in a video. That scenario you've just described, or it might turn up in your music. It's weird how it gets filtered through into your art, don't you think?
It does at times. Not everything does, but a lot of it does. Mankowski, for example, was a particular incident that happened. So, that became a song. it's not always experiences. Sometimes it's worries and concerns,
Really?
about what the future might hold and things like that.
I want to go back to, if it's all right with you, Gary, when you first became publicly known with Replicas, because I know you've been a really big influence on so many musicians, but the front cover of Replicas was kind of what first got me published as an author, because I was really inspired by this image on the front cover of the first album. And
Yeah.
I want to go back to that, if I may. When you first became publicly known with Replicas, to what extent was your vision of the world being reflected in those songs? Were you conscious of that, or is it just what came out?
No, I was really conscious of it. The Replicas was actually came from a series of short stories that I was writing, which were my idea of what London might become in the next 50 years or so.
Wow.
And it was all to do with the onslaught of technology and how that was changing things, and in a peculiar way, not dissimilar to what I'm doing now. But back then, the concern was all about technology, and it seemed to me that if you was to hand over the running of things to machinery, to technology, then it must surely realize fairly quickly that the problem to a smooth running society is people. So it would need to get rid of us. We were the obstacle to it achieving its mission of having this incredibly organized world. And so it was all about how that would sort of shape itself up. How would that happen? What technology would evolve into? How brutal that could be, and how frightening it would be. Whether we would recognize it in time. So it was all just very much sort of a childish sort of science fiction view of the future.
If you've got all of these, if you've got these stories, and I think the world of those stories sounds very rich with the characters and everything, then when they become part of lyrics, a part of songs, does it make the lyrics quite rich because it's having to be shoehorned? All this prose is having to be shoehorned into a lyric form. Like there seems to be something about the prose to lyric translation that seems to have been really working for you.
It is. It does work. If you get it right, it works. Now you can shoehorn an awful lot of information into some carefully selected lyrics, because the lyrics don't just speak to you as words. They paint a picture of what you're trying to describe, or a feeling that you're trying to give over. So with the lyric, you can afford to be far more restricted in the amount of wordage that you can use to explain something than you can with a story or a book. But you inevitably miss out detail in that, and perhaps things of a wider interest which you can explore more fully if you're writing a story. But it works, it works for me. And of course, with music, you've got the music itself to back up that mood that you're trying to create, because the music itself creates a mood that the lyrics then simply add the finishing touches to. So as a package, I think it probably works reasonably well. But it doesn't tell the full story in a way that a book could, or a fully developed story could.
You must be quite a harsh editor of yourself then, because it's not like there's millions and millions of words in your lyrics. It always seems to stand so well. It's amazing to me in how our friends electric people don't know what that subject matter actually is in there. But yeah,
that was good. I couldn't talk about what it was about because it would never have got on the telly. If I'd have said, when they said, "Oh, do you want to do Top of the Pops? What's the song about?" If I'd have said robot prostitutes, I wouldn't have got on it.
Yeah.
And it's that's a truth. That's a fact. So I had to be a little bit guarded. Do you know my memory is pretty awful? Actually, that's the truth. But I actually don't remember ever being asked back then what it was about, which seems unbelievable, doesn't it? But so I probably was, but I got no memory of it at all, because I don't remember ever deliberately trying to keep it a secret. I just don't think it came up what it was about.
Was the press more interested in having quite an obtuse angle and being hysterical about this and that, rather than really asking what it was you were trying to say, perhaps?
I think so, yeah. I mean, they seem to be in such a rush to just ridicule the whole thing, and me along with it, obviously, and to make this connection between machine music and what I was doing, they wanted to say that the music that we were writing, if you were an electronic act, the music that you were writing was all done by machines and it wasn't real, and you didn't really sit down and do it. And, so a lot of sort of ignorant things were written back then, right at the very beginning. Anyway, I mean, it didn't last too long. The hostility did, but not that sort of ignorance. But yeah, I mean, I at one point the musicians' union tried to ban me because they said I was putting real musicians out of work. How insulting is that?
The book that I write my chapter about you in is called Albion's Secret History, and in it, the subtitle is Snapshots of England's Pop Rebels and Outsiders. And something I was struck by, Gary, when I was reading Revolution is just what a hard time you got of people, in the way you've just talked about just now, just making life difficult for you. And do you think, I mean, I don't want to turn this into like COD therapy or whatever, but what always happens if you're being innovative, if you're trying to strike out? Is it envy because you were successful? Why is it that we're not, as a country, more supportive of people being innovative in some way?
I'm not sure. I wonder sometimes, when something new comes along, especially something like electronic music, which was seen as a threat to guitar dominance. And I didn't help that by saying things along those lines for some of those early interviews. And so you got people who are very deeply sort of enmeshed in guitar as a culture of modern music. The guitar was the pinnacle. Below that you had other things, right down to drummers at the bottom. Sure. Drummers would argue, but that's pretty much the way it's. Guitars were everything. So you come along and start saying, well, actually, you don't need guitars. I did have them, but you don't need guitars. They don't need to be the main thing. This instrument, this synthesizer, this can do more. This can express more, because it's not just a melody that you're playing; it's a very sound itself that you're searching to give you the feeling and the emotions that you're trying to present. So I saw it as a much more human instrument. But it was, it wasn't seen that way at the time by the media at large. And so I wonder if there's some sort of resentment in that, some sort of fear that you're going to change music from what they want it to be into something else they don't want. The fact that it did really well, so there might be just some, that there's nothing worse, is there, than seeing other people raving about something that you just don't get at all. I got a friend here that comes to visit that raves about a film called Manchester by the Sea or something.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. A big successful film, but I didn't get it at all. I thought it was a big pile of shit, So I'm going, and I'm a slightly more offended by it because she loves it so much.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's that sort of thing, isn't it? So if you put that on a much bigger scale, and you've got somebody coming along that's doing something that you just don't get at all, but it's number one and it's selling millions, you can sort of understand why they would feel even more determined to want to say their little thing about it and try to pull it down. I think that's sort of just human nature. So I've got absolutely I don't have any bitterness about all that early stuff at all. I fully accept that when you're at sort of at the cutting edge of something, all the slings and arrows that come because of that are going to come at you.
Right.
It's the price you pay, I guess, for being poking your head around the door first. That's fair enough. And I genuinely accept the fact that they probably didn't like it. And they probably didn't like me, the way I looked, what I was saying, the way I presented it. It was, I don't think people were making it up. They didn't like it. It was particularly spiteful at times, which is unfortunate. But as a sentiment, not liking the music, I'll be the first to say, fair enough. You don't like it, you don't like it.
Well, in a way, it's a compliment to you because you're doing something so unusual that's an expression of you that it provokes this extreme reaction. But what I found, I'm thinking of how you're portrayed on the front cover of the first album of Replicas. And, with the white face and the black hair, it's like a kind of an office worker, but who's, to me, this was my kind of, in my head, Gary, who'd been kind of drained by his life in some way. And there was something kind of uncanny about him. He kind of was human, but not quite. Were you kind of making a statement with that presentation of yourself, or could you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, the man on the cover is a character from the stories. The man on the cover is a thing called a Mac man, which is a robot or an artificial human, should we say, but with a cloned human skin. So everything felt right, everything looked right. It would even age to a degree, but underneath it was artificial. And the only way you could tell them was their eye didn't have a round pupil; it had a horizontal pupil. That was the only thing that separated them. So on the back of the sleeve, you see the eye. So that's all it was. You know, a Mac man was one of the people that went around. There was a thing called a quota test. Human beings had to take a quota test once a year. And if you fell below the required level of intelligence, then you were supposedly taken away to be re-educated for the betterment of society. You would come back more intelligent and more educated than you were before, where in fact you were not. You were just taken away and you were got rid of. And systematically, they would erase people until there were so few of us left that we couldn't do anything about it anyway, when it became obvious what they were doing. Yeah. The Mac man, it was the Mac man that would do the test. And so that's why there was a slightly sort of militaristic look to it, not military, but it lent towards it. It's very sort of official, had a hint of Nazi about it. Yeah. Aryan about it. It was a machine's idea of what the perfect human should be.
To what extent is it a kind of an English vision that you were having? It all seemed very English to me. Were you particularly talking about where you think England was going to go, or is it more about where you think we're all going?
Well, it was originally intended to be London, not even England, where I thought London was going, which is much the same thing, obviously, as the rest of the country, and I suppose to a degree much the same thing as the rest of the world. I mean, I didn't envisage it as being a specifically English thing, but it was London that I was writing about from an Englishman's point of view. So whether the Englishness of it is sort of is captured within that automatically, I don't know, but it was a young Englishman's view of what London would become.
Yeah. Did you have a sense that certain people who felt on the outside or a bit marginalized were going to rally to you? Did you kind of want to be totemic or even sort of iconic for people like that, or were you just doing your thing?
Well, I wanted to be a rock star, so there was a long-term sort of plan involved, as much as you can plan for something like that. Nothing worked the way I thought it would. I honestly thought it would take me quite a few years, several albums, and I'd chip away and get there. It would have been a better way to do it in some respects, because the longer your journey to success, the more prepared you are for it when it finally arrives. You've had increasing exposure to a larger audience, to more press interest, to dealing with record labels, and all the different things that are involved in doing something like this. When you're sort of dropped at very, very short notice, right in at the deep end of it, especially when you're a solo act, which although I was in a band called Tubeway Army, it wasn't really a band. It's pretty overwhelming, to be honest. So you kind of do all of your learning with everybody watching, and you inevitably make mistakes and do the wrong things and say the wrong things at the wrong moment. So it's unbelievably exciting. You know what I mean? It's not. I'm not whinging about it. It's amazing, but it's there's a price to pay for all the good stuff that comes in, and it seems to be there's equally shit depending on what mood you wake up in. So Our Fringe Electric, this great big classic song that launched my career, was, two songs stuck together because I couldn't finish them, and a bit of bad playing that created a mistake.
Is that riff? Sorry.
That bit.
That's what I was wondering. Is that the note you're talking about? Because that gave me goosebumps. That note. It feels like, isn't that amazing that you're saying that's a mistake? Because that just felt like that. It makes the hair stand up that bit. It's like it goes off grid for a sec.
Yeah, didn't write that. What I wrote was a semitone lower. If you ever play it a semitone lower, and it's pretty. It's not. It doesn't sort of jar the way that note does. You put that note in it, and all of a sudden, it becomes this different, slightly aggressive thing that drives along. And so, how can you come out at the end of that thinking that you've got some sort of special talent? Clearly not. A bit of shit playing and not being able to finish a song. That was it. So I come through all of that, getting all this abuse, for people saying that I was up myself, and I'm going, I'm the least up myself person you'll ever meet. I know.
Well, I don't think you come across that way at all.
I met my wife in '92, and I give her absolute credit for helping me to reinvent myself. So the second half of the career has been more enjoyable than the first half. I mean, the first half started well, but then declined fairly rapidly to a point of utter misery. And then I met Gemma, and it was just amazing. The patience that she showed to sit with me for a good year or more, to just going through what had gone wrong and why I was doing it, listening to my reasons for why the things that I'd done, and her very calmly saying that and putting up with all my angry replies to what she was saying. And I think in my desire to try to salvage my career, which was struggling almost to the point of oblivion by '92, what I'd done, I'd effectively taken me out of Gary Numan albums. I had my singing mixed really low. I had loads of backing vocals that were all over it. I replaced my guitar playing with another guitar player because he was better than me. And I just, took out the thing that had been such a key component of those early records, because I thought I was the weak link in what I was doing.
Wow.
Which is, I know it seems a bit bizarre, but that was my thought process at the time. And she was able to eventually make me understand that, I might not be the best singer, clearly. I'm never going to be the best guitar player in the world or the best keyboard player, but I have a style, I have a way of doing things. And she said, that's what people liked. They weren't listening to your albums to listen to virtuoso guitar playing, off and on.
Yeah.
The vocal. She's listening to you because you played it a certain way. Your melodies are unique to the way you write music. Your voice, whether you like it or not, is distinctive, and people liked it. So all you've done is taken away the very thing that they wanted and were into. So is it any surprise then that your albums have just died?
Wow.
And it took me, because you have to be slightly. There has to be a sort of slight amount of ego arrogance about you to accept that. And I didn't, I didn't for a long time. So not having much of an ego was almost my downfall, strangely enough. And it hadn't been for her and it was her patience that made me think, that actually makes sense now that you said it. So it changed everything about the way I worked. And that change of direction, that complete change of attitude about why I was doing it and what I had to offer saved me. And then the next album, Sacrifice, and every album since then, right up to the new one, has done better than the one before. So it's been, but I mean, I credit her with that. I credit my mum and dad with the beginning of it. There are a number of people that have been around me, and lucky moments along the way that have made it possible. In a way, I feel like I'm just a person at the back of it all that writes the songs. Without these other people being there, then I wouldn't be here talking to you. So I am grateful, and it is genuine.
She had to be very strong then, because you were pushing back, and it sounds like some kind of dark stuff, some anxiety, some fears were coming to the fore. And instead of going, oh, this is a bit much, he's not the Gary Numan I thought he was, she really worked through you with that to come out the other side. Like, I feel like the fans kind of owe her a debt of gratitude for going through that with you, but then that's a whole new stage of rebirth that you've gone through to go through that process together. Like, it sounds like it then took you to another level as a person as well as an artist.
Yeah, it did actually, because it was more than just the music. I'd never given much thought to the whole Asperger's thing. I talk about it very freely now, but back then I was aware of it, but it just didn't mean much to me. I seem to have a lot of problems with friendships, a lot of problems making them and certainly keeping them. Very uncomfortable around people. So I just pulled away. I had very little to do with people in general. She's sort of the opposite of that. And so she comes in, she has a brother that's diagnosed with Asperger's. She come in, recognized it in me straight away. And she was able to point out to me when I was being Asperger's-y, if there's such a word. We'd be at a table somewhere, and I would either be, I'll be being Asperger's-y, and I'd feel a little kick under the table. And I'd look at her and I'd say, "What am I doing? What did I say?" And she'd say, and she'd let me know what I just said or what I just did. And so you can modify your behavior. So my social interaction has become smoother over the years because I'm able to think, I better not say that thing I was just going to say, because
That leads me quite nicely onto a question I've really wanted to ask you. This is the question I most want to ask you, is about the grey man that you saw in the tube station, who comes up a lot in your work.
Yeah.
I don't know how to talk about it. It's so esoteric as an influence, but it casts such a long shadow over what you do. Why do you think that experience casts such a long shadow over you artistically, if you agree with that premise?
I think because it was such an undeniable moment that for the vast majority of humanity is still a mystery.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone's got their ghost story, and almost everybody disbelieves everybody else's ghost story. And yet I had this experience, which was absolutely undeniable, with a witness, thank God.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
So me and Gary, we to this day, we still talk about it and think about it. So it made an impression on both of us that were there. I think that's the reason why it made such an impact. It was such a massive thing. At the moment, not a massive thing, I suppose, but the meaning of it, the fact of what you've actually just seen, been a part of, been close to, was so enormous, because it opens up all sorts of other questions.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? I'm not religious. I don't believe in heaven or anything like that. And yet seeing that man, that ghost, proves that part of what I thought was wrong. I always thought we live one life, we die, that's the end of it.
Someone very logical, lasts it open.
Yeah, but if there's a ghost, if you've seen a ghost, then that proves without doubt that there is some form of life after death. I mean, it goes right back to replicas and all that sort of thing, where it's this fascination that I've always had with how what will happen to people, what will we become. But there's another song in there called ME, which stood for mechanical engineering. And that was a song about the very last machine ever. Long after the world has been destroyed and people are gone, there's just one machine left, and it's dusty, but it has like an eternal battery, and it's unlikely to ever die. So it's just stuck there. There's no reason for it, no work for it anymore, nothing for it to do. We just sit there and think about, this is it forever. And I thought that was incredibly sad, and it made me feel a huge amount of sympathy for machines. I remember once I was flying once, and I had an instructor with me, and he said, "You show a remarkable degree of sympathy for the machinery," because I was very gentle with the throttle and all that, I said, "But I do, and I said, and I talk to my aeroplane, and whenever I land and get out of it, I always go to the front and I pat it. I haven't got it now actually, but when I had it, I would pat it and I would say thank you for getting me back safely. I've had a relationship with machinery which has always felt easier and less stressful, and to a degree more trustworthy than relationships with people, apart from my wife."
Is it easier to show affection for them because if something about them doesn't work, at least there's an explanation, you replace that part. Whereas when something with a person doesn't work, there's a kind of a trauma or even like a karma, you could say, but we don't know what that reason was. So then it just becomes invest in the mechanical.
It's exactly that. Exactly. If a machine lets you down, it didn't mean to. If a human lets you down, you can never be sure that it didn't mean to.
And if
so there's that pain attached to it.
Thanks for watching this Zero Books video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be alerted whenever we release a new video. You should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to our Inside Zero Books podcast every week and can get access to the Zero Books Book Club and help us to continue making online content from the left.